Have you ever stopped to reflect on those habits that are part of your daily routine behaviors you consider absolutely natural and normal, but that, in reality, may represent the way your body and mind found to process and cope with traumatic experiences that marked your past? This is a discovery that can deeply surprise you. And if this possibility intrigued you, it's well worth continuing to explore the subject. You may end up recognizing yourself in situations you never imagined were connected. Think with me about a scenario that might feel very familiar. You're there, calmly talking with someone, exchanging ideas, when suddenly that person raises their voice. It's not exactly an aggressive shout, nor even a heated argument, but something inside you triggers an immediate alarm. Your heart starts beating faster, your hands begin to sweat, and you find yourself torn between two equally intense reactions. Either an almost uncontrollable urge to respond in kind, to retaliate with the same intensity, or an overwhelming impulse to simply flee the situation, to disappear as quickly as possible. And then, when you manage to process what happened, that internal question won't let you go. Why on earth did I react in such a disproportionate way? After all, it was just a normal conversation, nothing more than that. But here is the crucial point that often goes unnoticed. For you, in that moment, it was not just a normal conversation. At some point in your life journey, probably during childhood or adolescence, you learned that loud voices, raised tones, represented a sign of imminent danger, even if today in your current life, these situations no longer represent any real threat. Even if you are in a completely safe environment, your body and mind still keep that old programming active. It's as if there were an internal alarm system that was never turned off, continuing to sound whenever it detects those patterns that once signaled danger. This was just an introductory example, but the truth is that there are at least 7 distinct behaviors that may seem absolutely normal on the surface, yet are actually subtle indicators that you still carry marks of traumatic experiences. And I'm going to present each one of them in detail. The first sign that deserves our attention is the habit of apologizing excessively and often unnecessarily. You find yourself constantly apologizing for minor, almost insignificant things. Sorry for taking up space. Sorry for asking a perfectly valid question. Sorry for simply being present. The people around you often interpret this as a sign of exceptional politeness, as if you were someone extremely well-mannered and considerate. But the reality is far more complex and painful than that. This is not genuinely about politeness in the traditional sense. What's operating underneath is fear. Deeply rooted fear. It's the fear that if you don't apologize immediately, something terrible will happen as a consequence. Because at some crucial point in your development, not apologizing had serious and painful consequences. Maybe it resulted in shouts that frightened you, icy silences that punished you emotionally, a rejection that made you feel invisible. So, as a protective mechanism, you develop this pattern. It's better to apologize preemptively, before any problem arises, than to risk suffering later. The second sign that reveals unprocessed trauma is an extreme difficulty in saying a simple 2-letter word, no. And this goes far beyond being a naturally kind or helpful person. What is happening is that saying no makes you feel like you're re-putting your emotional safety, your social acceptance, your rightful place in the world and in relationships at risk. You end up saying yes when your entire being is internally screaming no. You accept situations, commitments, and treatment you truly don't want to accept. You remain in circumstances that hurt you, drain you, and make you unhappy. And why? Because at some point in your history, saying no resulted in real abandonment or the threat of abandonment, in painful rejection, in some form of punishment that left a mark. So you internalized a fundamental belief. Your survival, your worth, your ability to be loved depend on your constant ability to please others. And here lies a silent danger that grows over time. You begin to accumulate resentment, anger turned inward, and an exhaustion that seeps into your bones. Because living by saying yes to everything and everyone is not truly living fully and authentically. It's surviving, it's merely existing in constant preservation mode. The third sign that deserves our careful attention is something called hypervigilance, a state of constant alert that drains your energy. When you enter any new environment, your brain is already automatically mapping all possible exits, calculating escape routes. You can read people's emotional states before they even open their mouths to speak. You detect minimal, almost imperceptible changes in someone's tone of voice, facial expression, Body language, the way they walk. People often praise you for being perceptive, sensitive, observant. But the uncomfortable truth is that you didn't consciously choose to develop this ability as a talent. You were forced to develop it because, at some critical moment, your physical or emotional safety depended entirely on your ability to anticipate danger before it materialized. You had to learn to read subtle signals, to interpret every detail of the environment and people's behavior, to know exactly when to retreat, when to become invisible, before it was too late. And even if today you are in a completely safe environment, even if real danger no longer exists, your body and mind haven't been able to shut down this alert system. You continue living in this state of constant attention, always scanning, always checking, always ready to react. And this wears you down in a deep, invisible way that the people around you can't see or understand. We arrive at the fourth sign, and this one is particularly painful. The tendency to systematically minimize your own emotions and needs. When someone deeply hurts you, you immediately say, "It's fine, it was nothing, it's already passed." When someone disappoints or abandons you, you quickly rationalize it by saying, "It wasn't a big deal, I understand, it's okay." You cry alone, in secret, and then put on a mask as if absolutely nothing had happened. And this happens because you learned, through repeated experiences, that your emotions bothered the people around you, that crying was interpreted as unacceptable weakness, that expressing pain or complaining was considered dramatic exaggeration. So you began to swallow your emotions, to push them down. And you kept swallowing them until this behavior became completely automatic, an integral part of who you are. But there is a particularly delicate point in all this. When you systematically minimize your own emotions and needs, you unconsciously teach others to do the same. You establish a relationship pattern where your feelings are not taken seriously. And then you get stuck in a vicious cycle where no one truly takes you seriously. Not even you. Yourself can validate your emotional experiences. The fifth sign manifests as an inability to accept help from others. When someone generously offers help, you automatically refuse. When someone insists, genuinely trying to support you, you feel deeply uncomfortable, almost too vulnerable. Deep down, you've internalized the belief that depending on another person is fundamentally dangerous. Perhaps this originated in moments when you truly needed help, and no one showed up. No one supported you. Or worse still, maybe people did show up and offered help, but later charged a high emotional price for it, turning help into debt, obligation, manipulation. So you made a conscious or unconscious decision that it was much safer to do absolutely everything on your own, always. And the devastating consequence of this is that you live in a state of perpetual exhaustion, carrying weights you didn't need to carry alone, fighting battles where allies were available. But asking for help, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, feels impossible. Because for you, vulnerability doesn't represent strength or courage, as many say. It represents risk. It represents the possibility of being hurt again. The sixth sign that reveals unresolved trauma is feeling guilty for situations and problems that are clearly not your responsibility. When there's a conflict among friends, you immediately feel that somehow it's your fault, even if you weren't involved. When someone is sad or depressed, you feel like you should have done something to prevent it, to fix it. When something goes wrong in any context, you automatically assume the blame before even understanding what really happened. This happens because you grew up in an environment where you were conditioned to believe you were responsible for other people's moods, for the peace of the home, for the emotional happiness of those around you. When something went wrong, when there was conflict or sadness, the blame invariably fell on you. So you deeply internalized this message. If something is wrong, it's because I failed in some way. There's something even more delicate and harmful in this pattern. You walk through life carrying guilt that isn't yours. And this fundamentally prevents you from living with lightness and freedom, because you're constantly trying to fix things you didn't break, trying to carry responsibilities that were never yours. And we arrive at the seventh and final sign, which may be one of the saddest, a deep difficulty in trusting when good things happen in your life. When something genuinely positive happens, instead of simply enjoying the moment, allowing yourself to feel joy, you enter a state of anxious waiting for the next problem. You got your dream job, but your mind is already wondering how long you'll manage to keep it. When they'll discover you're not good enough. You met someone truly special, but instead of surrendering to the connection, you're already counting the days until that person disappoints or abandons you. You simply can't relax into joy. You can't believe that good things can just stay, can be lasting. Because in your past, every time you allowed yourself to be genuinely happy, every time you let your guard down and surrendered to joy, something bad happened shortly afterward. As if happiness were always followed by punishment, so you developed a pattern of never fully trusting what is good and positive. And this creates an extremely painful and limiting way of living. You end up sabotaging your own achievements and successes before someone or something does it for you. You distance yourself from people who love you before they have the chance to abandon you. Because in your internal logic, if you control when and how the pain happens, it'll hurt less. But the cruel truth is that you often end up creating exactly what you trying so hard to avoid, making your own fears a reality. And then you get stuck in a cycle of confirmation where you think, I knew it wouldn't work out. Not because it truly wouldn't have worked out, but because you didn't. Tio it too. Now, and this is essential to understand the liberating truth, is that recognizing these signs in yourself does not mean in any way that you are broken, irreparably damaged, or that there is something fundamentally wrong with you. It means you survived difficult circumstances, that you found creative strategies to protect yourself when you truly needed them. And that is definitely not weakness. It's adaptive intelligence. It's resilience. It's survival strategy. But it is also true, and this needs to be said clearly, that what protected you in the past may now be imprisoning you in the present. Those psychological defenses that saved you when you were a child or adolescent may now be preventing you from living fully and authentically. That constant state of alert that kept you safe in a dangerous environment now steals the peace you deserve. That automatic apology that avoided potentially dangerous conflicts now makes you practically disappear in your own relationships, rendering you invisible even to yourself. The fundamental problem is not that you developed these survival strategies. The problem is that you no longer need them to be safe. But your body and mind received that update. Yet they process this new reality. You continue fighting battles that ended a long time ago, fleeing dangers that no longer exist in the present, protecting yourself from people who may only genuinely want to love and accept you as you are. And perhaps the hardest part of all is the fact that these protections, these defense mechanisms, have come to feel like an inseparable part of who you are as a person. You can't even remember what it's like to live without them, what it's like to exist without these automatic patterns. But that absolutely does not mean you have to carry this weight for the rest of your life. In my opinion, based on everything I've studied and observed, you don't have to carry this alone. You don't have to keep living on emotional autopilot, reacting automatically to threats that no longer exist in your present reality. Recognizing these patterns is genuinely the first significant step toward healing. The second step, just as important, is allowing these patterns to change, to be updated. And look, this is very important. If you realize that these behaviors are actively preventing you from living fully, from having healthy relationships, from achieving your goals, there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeking qualified professional help. Talking to a psychologist, going to therapy, can literally make all the difference between remaining trapped in these patterns or finally freeing yourself from them. So after all of this, were you able to identify with any of the signs we explored? Which one resonated most deeply with you? Think about it and reflect on how these patterns may be operating in your life. And if this content made sense to you, share it with that special person who also needs to understand that these behaviors are not their fault, that they are not alone on this journey, and that there is real hope for change and healing.